Creatives make great leaders, I think, because when we design, when we show, when we create, we reveal a little bit of our soul. We don't hide. And that little bit of soul showing is something that I think leadership needs.
Hello, I'm Doug Powell. Welcome to This is a Prototype, the Design Leadership Podcast. Rama Gheerawo is the director of the Helen Hamlin Center for Design at the Royal College of Art in the UK, and the author of a book that I think should be on all of our reading lists, Creative Leadership Born from Design. In his book, Rama asks not only whether designers can actually be leaders, but whether we can in fact be better leaders because of our creative capabilities and qualities. If you've listened to any previous episodes of this podcast, you know that this is one of the central questions I've been asking with all of my guests. In this episode, Rama and I go deep on the epidemic of impostor syndrome among design leaders, and we explore his framework for creative leadership that's built on the principles of empathy, clarity, and creativity. Rama also shares with us some inspiring world leaders who embody these principles. Rama Gheerawo begins our discussion by describing the current conditions he sees in most companies and large organizations.
Why is creativity left out? Why is it ignored in most conversations? Why do most CEOs say, we want creativity, yet when you ask their staff, how creative is your organization, it rates very low. So there is this leadership moment around creativity coming into its own. It's a good time to be a creative, and it's a good time to have a creative heartbeat.
Yeah. And yet I find when I talk to designers who are now in some sort of a leadership role or position, and almost all of them achieved that or came to that in a surprising or unexpected way. As you describe in the book so eloquently, you never saw yourself as a leader. And that's a very common condition. It's certainly part of my journey. I never mapped this out. And the common reaction seems to be for designers finding themselves in a leadership role that I need to learn how to be a leader. I need to learn those leadership rules or behaviors or skills.
Yeah.
And they think that it's something else. And that's sort of inherent in what you're discussing, right?
I think you've beautifully described the situation there, Doug. The reason it's called creative leadership born from design, and that's emblazoned on the front of the book, is I believe design can be applied to anything for positive or negative effect, but there is always an effect. And what happens if you use design, and particularly inclusive design, to fix broken models of leadership? Do you then have something that designers can speak to? Because I hear this from design colleagues, friends as well. You were never given the formal training. And then where do you look? Do you look across to another sort of Western management university, an older male or female, typically male, coming from management or politics or law or business, telling you about leadership? Whereas we all know that creatives attenuate in a slightly different space. I always think we make great leaders. And notice how I said the all-encompassing we there. But creatives make great leaders, I think, because when we design, when we show, when we create, we reveal a little bit of our soul. We don't hide. And that little bit of soul showing is something that I think leadership needs. It holds you authentic to yourself. And I've had the great privilege of meeting a number of design leaders around the world. And there's positive and negative. The negative is none of them were given formal leadership training, or very few of them. And those who were felt it had to be tyrannical or linked to some kind of business model that seems to echo The Godfather.
Leadership by Francis Ford Coppola.
Yeah. and Marlon Brando thrown in there.
Brando.
Though I do believe Meryl Streep in The Devil Wears Prada scared me more because I actually had that boss. And as a creative, I could not feel myself growing in that organization. So creative leadership, the way we define it, with the 3 pillar values of empathy, clarity, and creativity, came from inclusive design. And when you talk about inclusive design, you have to look at who's excluded. And I realize in leadership, many of us are excluded by age, by ability, by gender, by race, by economics, by skin color. You know, you're too female, too brown, too black, too quiet. But one of the biggest factors of exclusions is this. And this only hit me in the last month when I was rereading my own book, this time as a reader, rather than an author. And it hit me that creatives are really excluded from leadership. And over the years, I cannot tell you the amount of times that I've personally sat down to meetings, and it's not my skin color. You know, I'm a male with dark skin tones. So I've met exclusion in that point of view. I think I've met more exclusion as a creative. That was a shocking realization.
Tell me more about that type of a scenario. What is happening in that room? How do they even know that you are creative or a designer? Like, do you wear that T-shirt? Or...
I think I probably wear the hairstyle. I have the uniform of a designer.
There's something in how you present or how they perceive you that is that they've put you in a box.
Yeah, I think it does change a little bit over the years, and in some ways, some aspects have taken some strides forward, but there still is an undertone in a lot of meetings. Do creatives make good business people? How do we actually deploy this? You know, is the creative the person that gets you into a crazy jet-fueled rocket and blasts you into the sky? Or at the other end of the spectrum, is it the person that makes the PowerPoint look good? So how can you be both creative and business-like? And I use the word business in a very traditional sense. You know, a lot of American mafia movies, I know we're referencing Coppola earlier, but they will say it's only business, and then, you know, the baddie will shoot someone in the head. It's all business. Why is that business? Why can't business be good, beautiful, joyous, and creative? So I think design has a reputation problem within organizations, and it's not just private sector, it's public sector, it's government. What do people think designers do? And here I go down to a very generic answer. So whenever I meet someone who is not a designer, just say in a restaurant, or I take a taxi, or you meet someone on a train, and you say, I'm a designer, 9 times out of 10, they'll say, do you mean graphic designer? Followed by fashion designer. And then when you explain what you do, and I actually have a position that has the word director in them, people are slightly baffled. How can you as a designer be a director? So I think there is a lot of work to do here. I think it's, you know, it's one of the signature pieces of the podcast as well, is the word design and the word leadership. They're almost repelling magnets. Designer,
Yes.
being a leader.
Yeah.
And yet so many of us are thrust into these positions because when you creatively lead a team with a sense of heart and a sense of passion and a sense of, you know, ahead, people realize that you're not just flexing the creative muscle, you're bringing that through empathic clarity to fruition. So designers, you know, we need our own leadership framework to take to the world, like management and business have done. You know, designers bring a creative impetus, and you need a business canvas. I'm not saying one replaces the other, but there is a gap here, and bless the podcast because I think it's bringing those words together. And the time is now. The words design leadership. Over the last year, I'm just hearing it more and more out there. So I think the creative community is crying out for it. But also the wider public is crying out for it. And that's where, I end the first chapter in my book by saying, this is not just a book for creatives. It's a book for the creative that lives in everyone. It's not a business book. It's not a self-help book. It's not just a story. It's not just a manual or a blueprint. It's a bit of all of them. And if there's a space in the world for these ideas to grow into, may they grow to fill it, and may we do that with our heads, hearts, and hands. So I feel that moment is now, when you've done 15 years of research, talking about a topic, and it just becomes so neatly represented by the term design leadership. There's something of serendipity that I admire.
Who are the exceptions? Are there figures out there that you see who embody this magical combination of qualities that we're reaching for? Anyone who comes to mind that you can tell us about?
So when we were researching and doing the book, we based it around the three values of empathy, clarity, and creativity. And there was business gurus, business leaders, also government leaders and third sector leaders who exemplified these different values. So people like Jacinda Ardern, New Zealand Prime Minister, talking about empathy being a strength and that you can work with compassion and kindness.
Not only talking about it, but absolutely walking it and
living it.
Yeah, living it.
I mean, demonstrating it and, seeing her country through lockdown, making that work. Satya Nadella, CEO of Microsoft, who talked about clarity being the most underestimated leadership quality. Because when you have a well-defined plan, you don't need a leader. And if that plan's being followed and it works and it doesn't need adjustment, but most plans aren't that. Most plans deviate. So you need the leader.
I'm so glad you brought up Satya Nadella and the point of clarity. I love the flow from empathy to clarity to creativity. And when you first mentioned it, I thought, well, clarity is kind of the one that you forget about. Like, that's the connector between empathy and creativity. But you're absolutely right. I mean, clarity is a real superpower of a designer, for sure. That is one of the things that we must always be doing. And without it, we can't operate. We can't do.
Yeah. It's that link that aligns what you think, what you feel, what you see, what you do in a straight line. It's about communication. It's a beautifully underrated quality in leadership and how it came about. And I'll circle back to your question about people that we see around us in a minute. But, when we were doing the research, we had a research fellow called Dr. Ninella Ivanova and a neuroscientist, Dr. Melanie Flory, who both work at the center on the project. There's thousands of books around creativity. There's hundreds around empathy or compassion or kindness or sympathy or, things that are in that bucket, we say. 2 books on clarity. And I think it harkens back to when the model was evolved, and it came from design pain. It came from working to use design to solve many social issues and problems that were around us, whether it's obesity in children in the UK, whether it's elder care, whether it's looking at gender disparity in Central America, or the plight of migrant workers across the world, but particularly in the Far East and Middle East. So one day, I came home that day and I felt crushed. I actually went and took a long shower and ended up bursting into tears because of some of the things that I'd seen, some of the things that really hurt my heart. And whilst I was there, I thought, well, what can I do about it? I feel that I'm using this tool, this field that I love, design, to try and solve situations, to address social issues, but doesn't feel like it's making a dent. Not specifically true, but in that moment, that's what I felt. So I thought, what lies above it? What lies around it? And the answer came back, leadership. So I thought, if you could apply design to everything, maybe design is the answer. So if you were to think about a leadership model that could include anyone, regardless of gender or ability or race or culture, ethnicity, or any human qualifier or characteristic, what would that look like? And empathy and creativity were formed in the mind. But it was only a few weeks later that clarity came through a couple of personal situations. And I was sitting there thinking, I've had a couple of difficult conversations at work. And one person ended it by saying, thank you for giving me the clarity that I've not had for a number of years. And also in a personal relationship that was on its way out at the time. So rather jokingly, Doug, I say, empathy came from being a human being. So empathy came from being human. Creativity came from being a designer. And clarity came from an ex-girlfriend. And there is truth in that, because that relationship, we were both wondering what happened there. And certainly I was from my end. And I the wisdom of a stranger on a plane, someone said to me, the person sitting next to me said, well, you do realize you'll not get clarity from this situation, and that's clarity in itself. So the word clarity just popped up several times over a month. And then I asked friends in the design world, is clarity something? Is that what people actually want when they come in and they may be talking about something else? I need a raise. I feel ignored. No one's used my designs for the last 3 months. I don't feel I have a voice. Getting to the clarity of the matter, they may be saying I need a raise, but actually, where is the point that they may be feeling undervalued? So I'm not saying, give them more value and don't give them a raise, but actually listen to the words, delve deep as a leader, listen and create that psychologically safe space for people to share their clarity, even if they don't know it yet.
That's so lovely how those serendipitous moments sort of illuminated the power of that idea for you.
And what I didn't realize, and I haven't often said this, so this may be something interesting for the podcast, but our neuroscientist pointed out that empathy, clarity, creativity also linked to 3 forms of yoga. I love simplicity. I love, complex ideas in a simple way. I think design is absolutely great at that. So empathy, clarity, creativity. You can also remember empathy, heart, clarity, head, creativity, hand. And the 3 types of yoga are Bhakti yoga, which is devotion, heart, empathy. Jnana yoga, which is head, clarity, knowledge. And then karma yoga, yoga of doing, of action, kind of creativity, deployment. So there was something there. I don't know. I was doing a lot of yoga at the time. So I don't know if something came through the brain cells and body cells and into the model.
It absolutely did. It did. I want to give you the chance. You said there was another leader role model that you wanted to circle back to. Was there someone specific in mind? I don't want to lose that thread.
Yes, absolutely. So we talked a bit about empathy, Jacinda Ardern, clarity, Satya Nadella, and clarity, Satya Nadella. Creativity was an interesting one because we struggled to really find celebrated creatives who are celebrated in the same way. So if you replace clarity just for a moment, and I say just for a moment, with business sense, there's lots of people that are out there, you know, the CEO of IKEA, who incidentally, you know, rumor has it, they have a philosophy or a saying that comes from Rumi, and I'm going to horribly misquote it here, but it's paraphrasing it. It's something like, when you walk on the way, then the way appears. So it's something there to do with being a little unclear. My own feeling of that is, you know, is something my mother told me from Tagore, India's poet Tagore, back when I was 15. And she said, you won't ever know exactly what is the plan and what's ahead. But, you know, Tagore wrote about it in 2 lines. He said, what light does destiny have for her little children stumbling in the dark? And the heavens responded, a blind understanding. And I feel as creatives and as creative leaders and design leaders, we are pretty good in ambiguous situations where the light doesn't shine. But yet when it came to writing the book, we couldn't think of those leaders who went through a traditional journey and were creatives and were designers. And that was another impetus for writing it. I would love for my 15-year-old self to have been told you can be a designer and a leader. Because I wanted to be a designer, and I just thought I'd be drawing stuff and creating stuff. But my heart also wanted to serve humanity, to improve life. The feeling within me then, and it was amplified by voices around, was if you choose design, you've not chosen the leadership pathway. And that continued through my 20s and, you know, and beyond.
Well, there's an anecdote that you share in the book that was, I'll let you tell it, but there was a pivotal moment where the sandwich shop story, where someone surprisingly came to you and shared with you that they appreciated your leadership, and that was very surprising and maybe an inflection point for you.
Yeah, it was an absolutely pivotal moment, because I'd left school not really being put in charge of anything. I was in charge of the library because I was a sort of Indian overachiever, basically, would study hard and do well in exams, not so well in sports. But, you know, when I left school, my final school report said he is well suited to the quiet academic life, may not lead anything. So I was rather struck by that and a little bit curious, not hurt, but curious as to why that was. So going from being radically ignored at a major arts festival when I was around 19 or 20, 20,000 people visited this festival in the UK, grounds of a manor house. It was like a kind of art Glastonbury, if you like. Our school and the graduates were involved in producing this and volunteering and supporting. You know, at 5 a.m, we'd volunteer to offload sandwiches to feed the 5,000 people that were going to visit that day from the food trucks. And, you know, not being put in charge of anything, I was just sort of, took an extra long break and was kind of having a coffee around the back of the food truck. And suddenly the person in charge of the food tent came with one of my friends who was tall and white and male, but we were all friends. And he was always one of the people, you know, the tall white male group that were put in charge of things. And he just said, Rama. And I thought, what's my mate doing ratting me out to the organizers?
Just having a coffee.
Yeah. And what he was actually doing, they'd asked him, who do you think out of your gang, friends, could lead the sandwich section? And that's what he was doing. He said Rama. So it was a friend of mine who volunteered me, and I just lent into it. I still remember the moment of thinking, someone's actually put me in charge of something. I can't believe it. And it's something critical. I was given free rein, and the people in charge did not question that. And I reorganized the flow of the marquee, the catering marquee, so we could get better line of sight of the sandwiches, more efficiency, so you could kind of smooth the curve of the lunchtime rush. And that was really where I was sort of exercising skills in design, flow, and services.
Wow.
And the team, I had a multi-age, multi-gender team. And there was a group of women in their 50s, I would guess, who were there, volunteered every year. And I just remember the thing that came to mind was having a lot of care, just making sure people had breaks, they had food, they were looked after, and they looked after each other. And most importantly, they had fun, that they had joy. And that's where this older lady came up to me, and she clasped my hands. And I still remember the moment, because she put leadership strength into me and leadership belief, which hadn't been there. Because she said, I've been volunteering here for 20 years, and this is the most fun and the most efficiency that we've done. And that's when I thought, maybe those two things aren't, are separate. And she said, you were a great team leader. And I kind of looked at her, and she said, you know why? Because you have care. You're a very kind person. And I just thought, that goes against almost everything I'd been told about kindness and caring decades ago, to be told that. So that was a transformational moment. And I know I've spent a bit of time telling the story, but it was one where leadership belief was breathed into me.
I just love that story, and your telling of it even brings more richness to it. And I think that unexpected moment, which in different ways we've all had, where we didn't see ourselves as leaders. There's a moment like you experienced where someone else sees us as a leader and names that, and the power of that is profound. I mean, that's really life-changing almost.
Yeah. And with design and designers, we have to do a lot of that with our creative teams. We have to sift and select ideas. Design is a great training ground for how to manage complexity, competition, collaboration, but also enablement. So it's not always even about reprimanding people. It's about redirecting. It's about recognizing. I think that moment of calling something out is something I really try to pay forward. And also say, as a leader, as a human being, again, if films, Hollywood, Bollywood would have us believe I love you is the most important words, but I see you, we actually wrote that before Avatar came out, I hasten to add, but I see you is actually something that is intensely purposeful. And when we do workshops and masterclasses, we do a little exercise of who haven't you seen in your working life or your personal or professional life, and actually to make a note of that person and what you're going to say and do to them, even if it's just to thank them for getting your favorite magazine, or that they worked late, or that they enabled the intern to learn something, or that they enabled you. They saved some time in your diary. They made the project better. They gave you the thinking space that you needed. And just that recognition is a really important thing. I see you.
I agree with that. And I also think back to the sandwich shop story, and the woman who came to you, she did two things. She said, you were a great leader. And she said, here's why.
Yeah.
And she really called out those qualities that you have that made you special to her and that made you a great leader. And that's something that too often I think gets missed when we get asked to or identified as a leader. I think many designers are left with why am I why are you asking me to do this? Am I the last one standing, or is there something actually special about me and how I, how I show up that means that you think I can do this well? Because without that, then we're left with the chronic condition across creative leaders and design leaders, which is imposter syndrome and lack of confidence, because they simply don't believe that they can do it.
Yeah. You lead us, Doug, into a really beautiful point, which is, what are the things that design leaders, creative leaders experience that's different or special or heightened? And I think imposter syndrome is one of those things that's right at the top, because essentially throughout your design degree, you're learning skills, craft, tools, mechanisms, processes. You're engaging with the community in a certain way. You're engaging with the creative process. But how does that fit into how does that become a leadership process? So you feel, because you haven't been given the training, you're an imposter. You've sort of drifted into this. But design teams need creative leads, and design teams need creative growth. Design needs to have a bigger and better visibility within organizations. So the idea of, even talking about creativity and design to other teams, such as healthcare, such as, in business schools. I mean, I know people have been talking about bringing design into business schools for nigh on 15, 20 years. But what about teaching leadership to designers and then design leadership back into the business school? So I think those learnings are going to be incredibly important. So what's next to imposter syndrome in terms of what we as design leaders and creative leaders feel? And also, the final chapter in the book has a whole series of what if questions. Things like, what if leadership was taught by poets, artists, Maya Angelou, Khalil Gibran, Tagore, for example, and actually they have been teaching about it, but it's just not recognized. As we've done some research, and maybe this must be the subject of our next book, but delving deeper into those questions, what do designers and what do people who have who desire creativity want? And when we did a piece of research with 120 people, what came out was 5 things. Active listening was number 1. Empathy was number 2. A diversity of expression and diversity in all its glory was number 3. No one said, I want someone who can reprimand me every time I make a mistake. No one said profit, shares, budget. That's all management. And at the last open masterclass that we ran about 2 weeks ago, that group of people from all over the world, mixture of people, brought me back to an essence, another essence. So I haven't said this, I think, anywhere else, Doug.
Breaking news.
It's breaking news, but from 15 years ago. Where did all of this start? And I love language. I love poetry. I write poetry. And part of creative leadership came from a poetic stance. And the word that I wanted to bring into the human existence that this group of people reminded me of was love. And love has been the word of this month. I'm hearing it in business contexts. I'm sitting in boardroom, and one person who was heading up a huge property company, I said to him, we're here to talk about the creative process. And he said, you read a poem about joy on stage yesterday, and it just made me think what we need in our business, in our property business, is more love.
Oh.
So we are saying this and not thinking we're going back, because love gets hippified, and it's actually a very powerful motivator. So the other word for empathy is love. And I've been brought back to the source of myself and thinking and writing, because empathy was a word that people were just about accepting 15 years ago. But now we're using the words love, beauty, joy, within boardrooms, classrooms, and on stage and off stage. So I'm excited about that, but there's a long way to go.
That's such a beautiful thread. I think of one of the great leaders I've had the pleasure to work with, who was my boss at IBM for many years when I was there, Phil Gilbert. And Phil, in many ways, embodies the classic sort of white male leader that you were referencing earlier. He's tall, he's strapping, he's got great charisma, and he wears cowboy boots, so he's even taller than he actually is. And we would get the studio in Austin, Texas, where the home base of the design program for IBM is based, and was when I was working there and working with Phil. We would get the studio group together. So we had several hundred designers there in that location. We would get them together occasionally for these, we called them campfires, like a Friday afternoon, just a time to get together. We would do some updates, some tactical things, but then Phil would kind of hold court for a little while and do a bit of a sermon. And he would close every campfire by pausing and looking around the room and saying, I love you. I love each and every one of you.
Wow.
And my goodness, it was every time I heard him say that.
Yeah.
And at times he is, his voice would crack. He was feeling it. And, part of it was just the surprise of this sort of classically, stereotypically, business guy leader showing up in that way. And it just had such an authentic power. It went so far to unite that community and sort of enrich the culture that we were building there. And I think that's just a lovely sort of testimony to the power of love in the business world. Yeah.
When you were describing Phil and the cowboy boots, I could visually see him. But when you said the story of the campfire, I actually got a flutter in the heart, because it is such a powerful thing. And I could never understand why you spent a lot of time with people that you work with, a lot of time with teams. Why shouldn't you show levels of care, kindness, representations of love? And I think this is one thing I love about design and designers, is you talk about passion and love and purpose, and they get it. They get it, because love is threaded into our work. And one of the things I've made a promise to myself is, I don't know if I'd call myself a design leader, but I feel, still feel like a leader imposter, but I am now at one with that, so it's okay. I see that thought floating across the mind and I let it carry on going. But I've made a promise to myself to say more of these words, use more of these vocabulary, until someone proves that I shouldn't be saying it. And no one has in the last 5 years, and it's ramped up in the last 3 years, and it's ramped up in the last 2 months. So 2 months ago, in Hong Kong, I was saying to people, it's not that life is short, life is long. And everyone has creativity, the access to creativity, whether we use it or not. But what are you going to use that creativity to do? What is your love letter to the world? Because mine is design. And there's something there where in audiences, it just brought people back to a meditative state for themselves. So what is your love letter to the world? And I believe that design is a love letter. And that's why we make good leaders.
That's a mic drop.
I haven't said that before. You know, as well as empathy, clarity, and creativity, there were 3 poems that came about to do with joy, faith, and grace, because I believe that's what, as humans, we all need, as designers, we all can bring. So, you know, injecting a little joy into every day. The whole world is designed. I was just speaking to a new friend, a guy called Tom Waller, who's, again, a design leader, you know, worked in sports industry, you know, many of the leading brands there. And he said, you know, some really interesting things. We were speaking about everything in the world is designed, and it's been through a design decision, or most things in the world. Certainly the world most of us see on every day, even the tree outside my window, even the forests in the UK where I am, they've been shaped and designed and, you know, fettled over years. You know, what we hold in our hands as designers is the ability to not just make or break someone's life, but to bring a sense of joy into that person's everyday. And joy, if you're doing a tax return, doesn't mean you're dancing around and celebrating the fact that you've got to pay tax. But it could mean you have an ease of experience and you get it done, so that then you can get on with living your life and being brilliant. And, you know, joy is so linked to health. And health, for me, can mean a conversation like this. It can mean watching a sunset. It can mean having dinner with the family, having a child fall asleep in the arms, or simply a smile from a stranger. So that's where joy came in. And then faith came from Jim Carrey, actually. So paraphrasing a commencement speech he gave, and it blew my mind. He was getting to the end of the speech and he said, don't have hope, have faith. Hope is a beggar that sits by the fire. Faith jumps through it. And then he said, when you walk through those doors, you'll only ever really have 2 choices in life: fear or love. Always choose love, and you'll never be untrue to your playful heart. So the way I bring that into my heart and my practice and my life is thinking of living your joyful truth. And faith, holding faith, because as a creative, as a designer, and as a human being, faith will be, you know, people say faith will be tested. Actually, faith will be grown. Because when things come to test you, where do you draw on faith? How do you look to have faith? How do you step beyond the impostor syndrome as a leader and have faith that when you step up, stand up, or voice up, or stand down, that's the right thing to do? And then the final one of grace was just going back to the word love. So, you know, in my spare time, have also been penning another book that's more stories, philosophical, spiritual stories. And that idea of grace came from, there's so much literature and songs and words and ideas out there around love, but do we actually know what it's like to be loved? How do you actually invite empathy, joy, faith in? And that's grace. And, you know, none of this is linked to a particular religion or sect. It's very human values. And Faith was actually, that poem was written when my father passed away at the beginning of COVID. So it was part of his eulogy. And Grace is actually a really dark poem, because one of the things that came from his eulogy in his life wasn't easy. I mean, no one's is, but, I wanted to celebrate his life. And I was talking about, why were we born? And I said, you were born to find grace in the darkest corners of your life. And I think sometimes that's what we do as designers. We walk in with creative grace. Creativity is a grace. And we bring it to dark corners of the planet, dark corners of the life. And that's where we lead. Because we're not leading to be a politician. We're leading to bring that grace to unseen places and to unheard voices and to people that most need it. So I'm passionate about design, and I believe it has the possibility to transform. The dark corners, we deal with that.
We've managed to pretty well fill up 60 minutes plus now with just a fascinating conversation. Thank you so much. This has been really, really amazing for me.
Well, and thank you, Doug, because, if a question is never asked, an answer can never be formed. And there's things here that I'm taking with me into the weekend, taking forward with me, things you've shared that I think are just incredibly powerful. And what an amazing time to be a designer, because we've got all of this work ahead. What an amazing time to be talking about design leadership, and a real honor to be part of the conversation and to be a part of the platform that you ably enable.
I love those words. What an amazing time to be a designer. In fact, I've opened many a presentation with those very words. And I think just yesterday I was spending time with design students, and they were asking me about there was a sense of apprehension, of concern, of what's next for this thing that we're devoting our life and our work to as we go out in the world. And I said exactly what you just said. You are stepping into such an amazing and palpable moment for the world, but also for design. I mean, my goodness, what opportunity. And we have no idea where this is going and what will unfold even in the next months or few years, but what a great time.
Yeah, I think to actually finally link the word design to leadership, how brilliant and blessed is that? So I think if we can step forward with a level of consciousness, everything we do, having that level of insight and empathic clarity, or the other word I would use is being conscious. Design, just think about what it could do. Just think about if designers were in the House of Representatives, in Parliament, in business, and stepping a level above design, even design with a capital D, just creativity. So I really wish that we open up creativity for all human beings and stop educating it out of them. And design has that role to play.
Yeah, perfect. Rama, thank you so much. To be continued, I hope.
Yes, please.
I look forward to the next time you and I are in the same spot on the planet and have a chance to spend some time in person together. I would love that.
Likewise.
That's all for this episode of This is a Prototype, the Design Leadership Podcast. Special thanks to Scott Leach of Brand Speak Communications for his production assistance, and to Graham Barton for his original theme music. I'd love for you to help me grow the audience for this podcast by liking and following it on your favorite podcast platform. And I'd also love your help finding great design leaders for future episodes of the show. Please reach out to me on LinkedIn with your ideas. You can also find out more about my work as a design leader on my website, dougpowell.design. Thanks for listening. Until next time.